You know, often been asked how all of this started and how all this came to be, and I can tell you I was working for a company in a kind of highly stressful position, and I was a magician at the time, and not a full-time magician, but that was what I was doing. I was performing and practicing and all those kind of things, and this job started to take way too much of my time, so I tried to figure out a way. I was looking for a way to stay into magic. And by chance, my SAM assembly met at Ken Klosterman's house. And it was the first time I had ever seen anything collectible, so to speak. And when I opened that, when I rode that elevator down and opened that big safe door, my whole life changed. Because there in front of me was a world I didn't know anything about. And I remember at the time there was a professor of mine there. His name was Harold Puff, and he was a professor of mine from Miami University. And so we're looking at all this, and he's kind of noticing that I'm taken back by everything I'm seeing. And he comes over to me and he leans over and he says, "Do you want to go to Collectors with me?" I didn't know what Collectors was. I'd never heard of it. So I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, there's a collectors convention coming up next month in Chicago. Would you like to go with me?" And of course I did. So I went and picked Harold up and took him up there. And Harold from that point became not only a past professor, but a very, very close friend of mine. And we spent a lot of times traveling to magic conventions together. So he kind of became my collecting mentor, and Ken Klosterman kind of started it all. And in the beginning, you know, everybody is telling me to focus on one particular thing. And that was the advice that I got. And when anybody asks me today, how do I get started, I tell them to focus on one particular thing, not to try to expand into all areas of magic, because it turns into what you've seen here. And so it's grown dramatically. This was in 1995, so it's grown dramatically over that period of time. I've moved it from one house to this house, and trying to move something of this magnitude it was pretty difficult. But I've loved every minute of it. You know, a lot of people tell me that my displays are really done well, and I take a lot of pride in that. I probably looked as hard for showcases as I did for magic stuff. And when I place things in them, my wife finds it hilarious, because I'll find something, get it set up, and I'll move it a quarter of an inch, you know, just to make sure it's just so right. And I want it to look right. I care about this collection. I care about the history of magic, and want to make sure that it's preserved in the best way that I possibly can. People always say you're just a caretaker for what you have, and boy, that's really true. You know, this isn't going to be with me for forever, and you know, immediately I'm beginning to realize that more and more, that it's coming really close to time to pass this collection on to other people for them to enjoy. I've had it a long time. It's been a wonderful part of my life, and you know, thinking about passing it on. So we call this the Thayer Room for rather obvious reasons, I guess. There's a couple things in here I'd like to talk about specifically. First is this set of next to the boxes. It's a 7-box set, and I purchased it from John Daniel. Now, for those of you that don't know John Daniel, he was a fantastic performer and just a great all-around person. He was a great construction guy, but he was also partners with Carl Owen in Owen Magic for a number of years. When John sold me these, he explained to me that Carl made 3 sets of these. The set that he was selling me was set number 2, and there were 2 other sets. One was in Prentice Taylor's home, and unfortunately Prentice Taylor's home caught fire, and that set disappeared in the fire. The second set he didn't know the whereabouts of, and of course this was the 3rd set. So flash forward a number of years to my friend and mentor Terry Harris, who always had a set of nest of boxes up on one of his top shelves. Me asking him, well, how many sets were in that, or how many boxes were in that set, him always telling me 5. Unfortunately, Terry passed away much too early in life, and I was able to pick up his collection. His family sold me his collection. And that nest of boxes, I finally got around to opening it. And as I opened them, I counted down to 7. And when I actually turned the key and opened the final box, I could see that Terry had number 1 all along. Me with no idea that that was the case. So there are 2 sets of these boxes that exist, and they're both right here with me. One of the fabled pieces of Thayer magic is the Gollywobble. And it was said that Thayer had them made, but literally couldn't sell any of them, so he gave them away at a party. They've long since disappeared, and everybody's been duplicating them and remaking them. But I'm here to show you an actual Gollywobble ball from Thayer, or bottle. And it actually has the $2.50 original price tag still hanging off of it. So again, a very unusual piece from Thayer. You know, just for sheer beauty of things, it's hard to overlook the Hamley nested boxes. It's one of the most decorative boxes I've ever seen, and certainly the most decorative nested boxes I've ever seen. It's got a label on the bottom of it that dates it to about 1880 because it shows the address of Hamley's on the bottom of it. It's a fabulous item, claw feet, a lot of metal trim. It's just exceptional. One other item I'd like to discuss is the Stillwell chest. This is a prediction chest where a lot of them have came out, but Stillwell was one of the first and probably the best. But it has a small chest inside metal chest. So the prediction winds up not only inside the large wooden chest, but the smaller metal chest as well. Again, made by Stillwell, and he might have made 20 or so. One of the more unique pieces in the collection is the bowl vanish. The bowls are filled with water, a cloth is placed over, the magician carries the stand with the bowls forward, throws it up into the air, and everything's vanished. So the way this operates is that whole bowl, that whole contraption telescopes down into the table opens up, it telescopes down into the table via a motor that lowers it down in very slowly. Once it's down in, a cover comes back across, so the table looks completely flat on top, and you just carry, what you're carrying forward is a skeleton frame under the cloth. So when you toss the cloth up into the air, everything's gone. The next piece I'd like to talk about is kind of a fabled P&L piece. They made a handful of these, and there's only 3 or 4 around. This particular one I acquired out of a collection out in California, and I believe it to be Frederick Eugene Powell's, but I'm still working on the proof of that. There's this whole story that goes along with it that leads me to believe that. But for now, let's just call it the P&L Carousel Cage production. You can actually see a picture of Jack Wynn doing this on the internet. So maybe you want to try to look that up and watch it perform. Because actually it works very similar to the way a bowl production does. All of these fold flat, these collapse, they sit down on the table, a cover goes over, and then when they're produced, you actually produce them, and when you produce them, they come out spinning. So it's a beautiful effect, and a very, very rare P&L piece. Not more than a few people have it. This is the Cannonball vase from Martinka. It's incredible workmanship. It's almost hard to believe that they could do something like this in the early 1900s. If you look at the rim on the Cannonball vase, it looks like almost like diamonds have been cut into it. I've seen one other of these, and it wasn't in the shape that this one is at all. So in this effect, a cannonball is placed into the globe, the top placed on, and when opened, a dove or a bird appears. It's just a beautiful piece of workmanship from Martinka. These are the Wellman appearing and vanishing lamps, fire globes, I should say. These were actually made from the original Wellman piece that was acquired by Dr. Albo. So he actually had 2 of these sets made. One of them is here, and one of them is in the Salon des Magies. I'm going to show you how they work. This is pneumatic. So by pressing this down and locking it into place, we're ready for the appearance globe. This is the vanish globe. So you come out, you take this empty tube, you place it on this table, and as the band plays loudly, you hit that, you come over here, you cover it with this cloth, you hit the pedal at the bottom, this one collapses into the stand and actually vanishes, and then you come over here and open this up to display the fire globe lit on this table. So it's a transposition from one table to another. I'll never forget the day I found this, the Aikido Mandarin table and checker cabinet. I called my good friend Dr. Albo and I asked him, I said, of course he was aware of this cabinet, and I said, Doc, how many are there? And he said there are 4 in existence that are known. And I was happy to tell him, no, now there's 5. And he was as happy for me as I was for myself. So this is the Aikido Mandarin table and checker cabinet. It was made in the 50s while Aikido was with Don Redmond. It is truly a museum piece. It's one of the finest pieces of crafted magic you will ever come across. This is a kind of an interesting clock vanish. I've never seen anything like it before. And once you see me do it, you may wish you'd never seen it. But it's kind of a Art Deco looking clock. So it's the same thing. You put the cover over it, the cover's there on the table. And when you lift up on it, it just collapses down like that. And then you cover it up. So when you take it away from the assistant, she's still standing there with a normal looking tray. This cabinet holds some very unique things. The first thing I'd like to talk about is Johnny Gahn's Pillar of the Magi. It's beautiful, as you can see, and when Johnny sourced the hardware on this, he actually went overseas and got the hardware that was actually available at the time that this would have probably been built, around 1900. So you're looking at real hardware there. This is unique in that when the cards rise, or when the effect is, you take the cards out into the audience, you have 3 cards selected, back into the deck, you bring them back in, and you put them into this compartment. Unlike other of the Pillar of the Magi's, what happens with this one is the first card actually rises out of the compartment here. It's the wrong card. The second card rises, and it rises backwards, and it flips around to show its face. Again, the wrong card. The third card rises, again the wrong card. Magician in frustration steps away from the whole contraption. Cards fly up out of the air. In the beak of the eagle, the person's card is selected. So this is not just the fly part. This has the addition of the rising card part to go with it. Got a lot going on down inside that. The next thing I'd like to talk about is a spirit clock that I have here. This was purchased from me from an estate company in New York, and they were handling the estate of Frank Pearson. So when I bought the clock came, I wrote the guy and said, that's great. I normally like to display something about the magician if I know it. So the guy was kind enough to send me Mr. Pearson's scrapbook. And this has all of his performances in it from the 1870s through about 1915. And so I displayed the clock with those with it. And I've even got a picture of Mr. Pearson himself with the clock. You can see the smile on his face, which probably tells you he likes it as much as I do. It's a beautiful piece. The next thing I'd like to talk to you about is from one of the most famous magic builders in the world, who's by the name of John Martin. He was English. This is his spirit clock. He actually made 2 hands to go with this one. I was told this was made for Jack Hughes, but no proof of it, so take it for what it is. It's a beautiful piece by John Martin. And we also have in the collection the corresponding fairy bell that was sold with the clock, again made by John Martin, who did some of the most beautiful metal workmanship that has ever been done. Last piece I'd like to talk about is this. It's the Talking Skull by Abbott's. This was made in the 40s. In 1944, this trick sold for $55 and was a special order. Think about that. That's a lot of money for that time period. And basically it's similar to, if you're familiar with Balsamo, it's similar to Balsamo. And then when you set it down, it goes through a series of planned clicks, and you have to time your patter for hit the click once for yes and twice for no. So it's a matter of timing your patter to match the sequence that the skull goes through. Again, very few still left around, and that one working perfectly. I was never a moneymaker collector, and so we need to talk about how it happened that I have over 80 of them now. My friend Terry Harris was a big moneymaker collector. In fact, he gave many lectures on moneymakers throughout the country, really. This was a big part of his collection. And when I acquired his collection, I decided to keep it. You can even see the box there that says Terry's Magical Empire. So that's my little contribution to recognize Terry and the fact that this was actually his collection at one time. So there's many moneymakers here. There's Don Allen's original moneymaker. There's some very old, one-of-a-kind moneymakers. There's 3 different Thayer moneymakers. There's a Wellman moneymaker. So many different kinds. But I want to talk about one in particular at this point, and it's the oldest moneymaker in existence. And it's in the center of the cabinet, and it was patented in 1891. I can't believe there are more than just a couple of these around. I know you always have to be careful about saying something's the only one, and I know it's probably not the only one, but they certainly are extremely rare. And there you're looking at the earliest moneymaker ever made, again, patented in 1891. This is the Okido card restoration, designed and built by Okido. It's the standard size, and basically what happens is a person selects a card, the card's vanished, and it appears one piece at a time in this particular frame. The movement on the back is very intricate. Comes with its own case, a beautiful piece of Okido workmanship. Some of the very early Thayer elephant head tables, what actually happened, instead of just painting the tables, they actually carved the design into the tables. So that's one of the ways you can tell the very early tables from Thayer from the later tables that were just painted. If you would rub your hand over that, you can actually feel the carving of each of those designs that you see throughout the table. So again, pretty rare, and both of the side tables are of that nature. They both have the carved design in them. I've removed a few of my favorite little vintage props to show you. I was always fascinated by the coin caskets. This one is leather covered. There's 5 or 6 of them in the collection. I'm going to show you 2 of them now. This one's leather covered, and you put a coin in there, and every time you open and close the coin, actually there's 4 coins, the coins vanish one at a time. This one is leather and beautifully decorated with brass trimmings. This is a little more modern one. This is Charles Kalish's coin casket. I believe this is from probably the 70s, early 70s. But a remarkable piece as well. The next thing I'd like to show you is called a watch box, and it's a ticking watch box. So basically, you put a watch in here, it vanishes, or the people can still hear it ticking, and even though it's ticking, the box vanishes, or the watch vanishes. And the way they hear it ticking is this little, there's actually a pocket watch in the top. I've removed the mirror. The mirror fits there. I've removed it just to show you the watch that ticks on the top of the box. And this watch is dated 1865. So this particular item goes back a long way. Beautiful wood, beautifully done. Next thing I'd like to show you is a canary box. Again, beautiful burled wood, inlaid wonderfully with brass. In this effect, you show the box empty, you place a card or a coin in it. When you open the box again, a canary flies out. So this is one of the staple items that you'll see from the late 1800s, and you'll also see these in the Hoffman books. Next thing I'd like to show you is one of my favorite pieces. It's the Wellman color changing balls, and they operate very similar to a Morrison pill box, if you know what a Morrison pill box is. So actually you're changing the color from one side to the next in between these two vases. And this one, of course, is doing just the opposite. I'm sure you've all heard of the Circus Museum in Sarasota. These were once part of that Circus Museum. In fact, they are marked CMS looks like number R12 or something to that effect. But these were part of the Circus Museum in Sarasota at one time. And again, that kind of makes them extra special to me. This effect's called Confusion in the Ark by Thayer. I really only know of two of these, and amongst the Thayer collectors there was a big discussion about whether these two doves on top are real or they were supposed to use real doves for the effect. And in fact, when I acquired what was left of Thayer Studios, which included all the workshop plans, in fact all the original workshop plans and all of the instruction files, I was able to run across the blueprint of this effect, so there's no mystery anymore. You can see the doves were part of the effect, and there they are on the diagram. So the Confusion of the Ark is complete, and again, probably the only complete one I know in existence. You know, in the Thayer room, there's a few very special things that I'd like to just stop and focus on, and the Thayer croquet set has to be one of them. Very rare, again, only a few actually ever made, and only a couple survived. This particular one was refinished. It is a Thayer set, so it's original Thayer, but it was refinished by Carl Williams, and again, it belonged to my dear friend Terry Harris. But that's a very rare piece you're looking at, the Thayer croquet trick. Another couple of items that are really one of a kind, you see them in here. It's a stand for a crystal ball stand. So it's a reader stand, and the back of it slides open, and you're able to actually read the messages from the back. It's stamped Thayer. I've never seen another one, and no one in the Thayer world has ever seen another one. And strangely enough, they actually created a duplicate that is ungimmicked. So you have the gimmicked and the ungimmicked that you can leave on the table after the reading is done. So it's a couple of pretty amazing things that I don't think you'll see anywhere else but here in my collection. Magic sets. They're beautiful. These are some from the turn of the century. Typically these would be some little rich kid's present. As you can see, these weren't played with much. We have about 60 magic sets in the collection. One thing I'd like to talk about as well is provenance. Provenance of an item means everything. If you don't have proof, you really have very little. I believe, and for very strong reasons, believe this is Dante's floating ball. However, I can't prove it. So at that point, it's just a floating ball. So what I'm suggesting is, as these historical things pass through your hands, document it. Write down what you've got. Write down where it came from. Make sure that the next person handling it knows what they have. Because in this instance, the owner passed away and couldn't tell me the true story. Automatons, one of my favorite things. You can see this little guy waving his wand and getting ready to make the change from the cup in his hand. Right before he does, he sticks his tongue out at you to let you know that he has fooled you. This one from about 1890. It's French made. Lambert, I think, is the pronunciation of it. I've got several automatons in the collection, but this is one of my favorites. This is a French dressing screen from about 1870. I was visiting a local antique store when we ran into this. If you look closely at the top, you'll see a performing magician. This is all original. When I saw this, I recognized it as being on the catalog of the Fechner book. And something very similar is, and in fact it's in the Salon de Magie collection now, the actual painting. But here's this beautiful print of a magician performing in an original 1870 dressing screen. I've put another automaton in front of it. This automaton was, I was touring John Daniel's home, and he brought me out and he played this automaton for me because he knew, I told him I was fascinated by them. And I said, John, someday I'm going to own one just like that one. Little did I know it was going to be that very automaton I was looking at that one day I would own. So I acquired this from Kathy just a few years ago. It's a beautiful French automaton, all original clothing. The monkey reveals different changes under the cup. He winks, his eyes move, and his mouth moves up and down. Beautiful piece. Psycho. No, it isn't the real Psycho. He's living out in LA with Johnny gone. But this is a duplicate of Psycho. The story goes when Johnny was doing some work on the Houdini Hall of Fame, they paid him with the original Psycho. The only stipulation was Johnny was supposed to create a duplicate of the original Psycho to be put in place so that the fans there never had any idea that the original Psycho was gone. So this is Johnny's duplicate. I believe he used Psycho's actual face to do the face on this particular item. It's non-working, where Johnny's does work, but it's a faux Psycho, if you will.